Thank you everyone for being here today. The government believes in the equality and equal treatment for all people. We believe that everyone being treated the same and as equals is a fundamental right and a fundamental value in the U.S. We've been given the resolution here today that the U.S. federal government will reform the tax code. Observation 1, resolution analysis. As the government, we have the right to define. We're going to define this as a policy debate. They've asked us to reform something, and we will be enacting a policy in order to do this. Observation B, the terms. The U.S. federal government, we will define as Congress. Will reform is to make change to. And the tax code is somewhat contextual, but it refers to the current tax laws and codes in the U.S. as set forth by Congress. Subpoint C in this is net benefits. Our criteria will be net benefits. In the end, we will show you why our plan creates the most net benefits for the most people overall. Observation D, the plan. Congress will pass a law enacting a 17% flat tax for all U.S. citizens. Once again, Congress will pass a law enacting a 17% flat tax for all citizens. This will be done through, obviously, normal means of enforcement. We already have everything in place to pass tax codes as well as to enforce laws here. So let me get on to my observation 2. I'm going to tagline this. Yes, sir.
Just with your plan. So does that mean like corporations too and small businesses?
This is a personal income tax.
Okay.
Sorry. Observation 2, simplicity. The harms right now. The current tax code is extremely complicated and cumbersome. Now, our inherency is we know this because currently today, 2014, the U.S. personal income tax code is 73,954 pages long. At a rate that it increases at 3%, that would completely double in 24 years to over 150,000 pages just in tax codes. Our solvency, our plan quite simply would simplify this. By eliminating all the different tax brackets, by eliminating all the different ways personal income tax is reported, we would be simplifying this. Our impacts here are very quite simple. First of all, fairness. Everyone pays the same amount of income tax. Secondly, simplicity. If you know what you're paying, you're more likely to pay it. There's also becomes less confusion. In less confusion, there becomes less chances of crime, less chances of corruption. We also see greater follow-through when everyone's paying the same amount because more people follow through. There's a simplicity in paying the taxes now. We see less need for complicated and complex tax returns, and we also see, and that's we're good there. My observation number 3, and you can tagline this, fairness. The harms is currently there's different tax brackets for all. Now, not for every single individual person, as people fall within these brackets. The inherency is, right now there are 11 different tax brackets in the United States, ranging from a low end of 10% to a high end of 39.6%. Of these different tax brackets, each can be filed under 4 different manners, ranging from single, married joint, married separately, head of household. So when you work that out, that's anywhere between 28 to 30 different types of tax brackets. The solvency is everybody here in our plan will be taxed at the same rate. Because everybody is taxed at the same rate, we lose all these different ways of filing and stuff. The impact here, to start off with, people feel equal. People know that they're filing the same amount, they're paying the same amount, there's a greater sense of equality. They're more likely to report and file their taxes because they don't feel like, oh, well, I'm being charged a different amount or I'm not being charged this. They're more likely to pay their taxes. Now, my observation number 4 is economic growth. Currently, the U.S. collects 3.2 trillion in income taxes. The inherency here is that 400 billion of income tax every year goes uncollected. Our solvency is, again, our plan would simplify the tax code. It would also, it would make everyone pay a flat rate of 17%. The impact of this is that in the first fiscal year this is implemented, there would be a growth in revenue collected of 1.8%. Now, 1.8% to you may not seem like that much, but when you're talking about $3.2 trillion, you're talking about significant hundreds of millions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars, I misspoke there, that would be collected. Our impacts here would be growth in the chemical and manufacturing fields. We would see an immediate 3.5% growth in those fields. Now, because we have growth in chemical and manufacturing, that would also lead to a greater growth in supply and capital goods and the other industries, because the chemical and manufacturing supplies the necessary goods into these organizations. We'd also see a greater growth of after-tax income. Additional impacts, yes, sir.
Where does the 3.5% growth come from if they're being taxed more?
Because they're not necessarily being taxed more. It was being taxed a flat 17%. So depending on where their pre-tax income was before this plan, there's a possibility they're being taxed more or being taxed less. We don't know specifically as to who you're referring to. Other impacts here is the housing sector would grow by 1.5%. We would also see under a flat tax rate, all income is taxed after personal allowance is applied. So once again, the U.S. federal government, through an act of Congress, will pass a plan which would reform the tax code and create a 17% flat tax rate for income tax for all U.S. citizens. I've shown you the impacts. I've shown you my observations, and through simplicity, through fairness, and through economic growth. And again, I reiterate what the government said at the beginning. We believe in the fairness and equal treatment of all individuals. By having a flat tax, all individuals are treated fairly and taxed the same rate. We believe being fair and being equal is a fundamental right of the U.S. Perhaps the opposition disagrees. Thank you for your time.
Signaling. Do you know what he's talking about? You want to back him up next round?
I think it would be conflict of interest because I already know what their disadvantage is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was out there.
Oh.
Tom, what was just the tagline to your first advantage?
I believe it was simplicity.
Simplicity.
Simplicity, fairness, economic growth are the three.
Get a roadmap, sir.
Yeah, I'm going to go off case and then on.
Green. Just the green one.
Just the what?
Let me just take a sip from my water and then I'll start.
Thank you.
Yep.
I realized that I have no way of seeing which is which.
Thank you everyone for being with us today. We have an important debate topic to discuss, which is reforming the U.S. tax code. I'm going to start with off case with some disadvantages to the opponent's plan. So our first case position is a disadvantage one of system shock. So disadvantage one, system shock. The A point is that in just the last year alone, the tax code has already been expanded to increase the earned income tax credit, increase the child tax credit, as well as put new taxes on the highest earners in our society. So this is all just in the last year. Now remember in their terms where they talk about the tax code meaning the current U.S. tax code. So the point is that there's already been so many changes to the tax code that more changes is just going to muddle it up. I'll get to the B point. The B point is their plan is a new change, and it's a big one. It's one that will shock the system. It's a tax policy change that the United States has never seen. A flat tax for all of its citizens is sure to cause the system some shock, especially when we already had all these other tax credits and deductions already altered and expanded. So the internal links is that it's just going to be too much to deal with. a 17% flat tax, as well as all of these tax deductions. The burden is going to be on the government team to talk about how these deductions interact with their plan, because I can assume that it's just going to be a 17% flat tax, yet still these tax credits and deductions that occur. And the impact of that now is that you're not going to have equality, because people will still be getting their tax credits or deductions, while at the same time everybody's paying the same flat 17% rate. But in reality, those rates are not even, because people live in different circumstances. And I'll get a little bit more onto that story when I talk about no solvency. So the impacts of DA1 of System Shock are, first of all, that it's unenforceable because there becomes too much tax code that interacts with each other and becomes very intermingled and complex. The second part is you have a decrease in efficiency because, again, all of these new changes just this last year and now this new one. So efficiency decreases of the tax code of the IRS getting their tax forms back to the citizens. A decrease in total revenue because the 17% flat tax will effectively lower the tax rate, meaning less revenue, and a decrease in public services because without this revenue that would be coming from the tax law as it is, that the government industries and agencies it'll be a lot harder to predict how much each public service is going to need, and they're not going to be able to get all the revenue to the public services that they need. After all, the current tax code that is for this year is based on the current factors that are at play. Adding in this huge 17% flat tax is just going to throw off all of the calculations, and public services are going to have to be cut. The next observation is observation 2 of no solvency. So the A point is that corporations are notorious for finding loopholes. So, for example, like corporations and the more successful financially firms are the ones who are going to have the money to hire big law firms of just tax attorneys to help them find the loopholes. So what loopholes are going to look like, the B point in context to their plan, is that they're going to say, well, how can we get the 17% deduction and hide hide as much income as we can. That way, the hidden income is not taxed. At the same time, yes.
Can you clarify your B point there? I kind of got lost in translation.
Yeah. So the B point is going to be. So we're talking about like how the corporations are going to find loopholes. The B point is that your plan's major loophole is that and just one of them is that there's going to be the ability for the more successful firms to hide income, especially from offshores, like we're seeing with Burger King and their investments overseas. And so they're hiding income that is now not going to be taxed by the 17% rate. And at the same time, they'll be trying to find all of the deductions and things that they can as well. So the C point is that these corporations and rich companies are just going to hire tax attorneys and lobby Congress to make sure that the loopholes are there for them and that they don't have to deal with them. The impact is no solvency. Our next disadvantage 2, environmental DA. The A point is that right now there are incentives for companies such as chemical and manufacturing companies not to want to overproduce. And the B point is that their plan, when they're saying, hey, it's going to increase those sectors and how much they make, that then the chemical companies are just going to be producing more chemicals, which is going to contribute to an environmental disaster. So that's the B point, is that their plan increases chemicals and increases manufacturing. The C point is you have plants dying, you have ecological systems going out of whack. The D point, you have farming decreases, less food, higher costs for food, and so anything that they're saving by increasing the amount of money that the chemical companies get will just be absorbed by the consumer when they have to pay higher prices for their food. So now, getting into their first advantage, onto the case now of simplicity. They say the harms right now is that like it's just too complex of a tax code. And my first response is like complex in relation to what? A tax code generally is going to be complex. Every single country that has a tax code, it is complex and it is multiple pages. And it's meant to be that way so that you can learn how to efficiently get the resources from your citizenry in order to tax them effectively. The inherency, I don't really see a whole lot of like why it's complex. So I can just assume it's always going to be complex, and that their plan, like we said with if you cross apply our first DA of System Shock, makes it more complex. They're not saying they're doing away with the whole tax code and it's just 17% flat tax. They say with the current tax code, they're adding on a 17% flat tax. So that's going to make things, the turn here, the impact turn, is that things are going to become more complicated. And onto their fairness observation, people might feel equal, but in reality, the corporations are going to be the ones who are getting the lion's share of the benefits from this. So you can turn the impacts on fairness, and that corporations are going to be treated more fairly, if you're willing to use that terminology. And economic growth is going to be a decrease in economic growth, so impact turn there. And they said they don't know where the increase in the percentage from is coming from. It's going to depend on these companies, like taxes before and after, and so the burden is on them to tell us literally how this growth is going to happen. Vote opposition.
Yeah. Just simply anything they're talking about corporations such and apply. We're talking about personal income tax. So they're not even on subject there. You need to answer. Literally, you need to go through. You answer system. You got to answer everything he said there. You got to answer the no solvency. Things like.
All right. Thank you, judges, ladies, gentlemen, lady on the couch there.
Oh, hey.
Let's have a good debate. I feel like you guys laid down some good, solid clash for us to work with, and let's get right into it. We, the government, have proposed that as our resolution was defined, we, Congress, have chosen to reform tax for the individual persons of this country to a 17% flat tax rate. Some of the advantages to this plan would be to simplify for equality and for economic growth. Let me get right into it and talk about each one of those things. Currently, the tax code is confusing and abundant, and it is confusing was the wrong word. I apologize. It is too complicated, and we believe needs to be simplified in some way, shape, or form. I'm sorry, I'm a little off right now. Okay, let's talk about the opposition's disadvantages. Disadvantage 1, system shock. Our plan is not a burden, it is a solution. We propose that we drop it to a solid flat tax rate so that we can eliminate some of the shock on our system and the complications that currently exist. So our plan is to be a solution, not a burden. The system shock disadvantage does not work. They talk about the last year alone, and how more changes is bad. Our change is a positive change, and it's going to simplify. And they said some of the impacts are it's not equal and it's unenforceable. We do not believe this is true. We feel that it's a simple code that will be implemented, and it would be very easy to enforce. They also said as a decrease in efficiency, our plan is a one standard tax form for all individuals, so it won't be, it'll be more efficient, it'll be a more standardized system for all, and they also said about the current system and how we were adding on to it. We're trying to reform, not add on to the current. We're trying to simplify the current tax codes. So just to make that clear. And on their no solvency, they got into corruption loopholes. Successful companies and corporations will find loopholes, and no matter which way the system is working. That is besides the fact of today's argument. Big corporations, today's argument is about individual tax flat rate. That is what we are here to talk about. And let me get into some of our advantages. Economic growth. As my teammate said, there'll be a lot of, I'm not going to reiterate because of the timing, but as he said, there's a lot of factual percentages of growth and benefits to this plan. I heard nothing of the opposition as to the negative of all those growths. Their environmental disadvantages, more chemicals. I'm going to let my teammate rebuttal on that shit or follow up on that, and fuck that. Sorry. Simplicity, complete. What?
I can't. You have to touch it.
I can't touch it.
I
don't know
can't.
what to touch it. I don't even remember what you said, Kenneth. So that's why I was trying to skip it about the chemicals. Sorry, bro. In fairness, the corporations was touched on again by my team, my opposing team. Corporations is besides the fact they will find loopholes, and they're known to find loopholes, and let's try to implement a plan where it's standardized for all individuals, and they will have hopefully a harder time finding those loopholes that you speak of. So today you should vote government because our plan will simplify and make equality and fairness part of the tax system in this country. Thank you. Have a good day. Sorry, bro. I apologize for swearing, everybody. I got fumbled there and I let a curse out.
No worries.
Get to put dollars, John.
I swear in the background of these videos all the time, so it's fine. Hopefully I won't be the competition. Okay, so thanks everybody. Let's just get started with this. First I'm going to go on case to the advantages and then off case, okay? So the advantage one, simplicity. My opponent said that this simplifies the tax code is supposed to cause less confusion, when really all they're doing is adding this 17% flat tax to people. So we still don't know how tax write-offs and what other things are going to affect it. But you know who will learn these things? Rich, powerful people. CEOs are going to, who have tax attorneys, will be able to find every sort of loophole there is, every sort of tax write-off they can sneak out of this. So they're going to be really scouring this code. So what you're going to see is the average consumer, like you or me, paying an increased tax of 17% usually, and then you're going to see CEOs pay a way decreased tax, and then find their ways out of even paying this one. So it's going to make it more complicated because we don't know how any of the existing tax laws are going to affect it because they're not getting rid of those. So we're just adding this we're just putting this personal tax on it. So like, how are donating to charities going to be affected by this? Those are questions that the government team just did not answer. But the tax attorneys will find a way to abuse it and at the expense of you and I. Now let's go to fairness, which is kind of almost the same thing. There will be no equality because you know who's going to benefit from this? People who had a 36% or the top bracket of what Tom's speech was, the top tax bracket is going to almost half their tax rate, and they also are the ones who are like CEOs of corporations who just have firms of lawyers who are able to find loopholes, scour these codes, and find the things wrong with it. Yeah?
In the U.S., are there currently more people that sit at like the 30% tax bracket, or people that sit at the lower tax bracket?
There's more people who sit at the lower tax bracket, but those are people who need their money more, who are struggling with bills, as opposed to CEOs who. The reason we have a complex tax system is because CEOs can afford paying more taxes, and the little guy can't pay it that much. You know, this plan's gonna make you choose between paying your mortgage or paying taxes. So do you want to go to jail or do you want to be homeless is the question we have to ask ourselves. Then Bill Gates is going to ask, I'm just going to pay some taxes. I'm going to pay half the tax rate I used to pay. He's going to love it, but at the expense of the majority of the people. And even though we tax corporations more, they have so much more income, it's still going to be cut. So how can you ever consider that fair? Let's talk about the DA now, system shock. Okay, so now that you know that all the tax laws and how we don't understand this code and how it's going to affect things, if they can't even explain it to us that how this system works, how are the average consumer going to do it? How is Congress going to figure out ways to monitor this? How is the IRS going to find out? This is all problems with their thing. So it's going to lead to less efficiency, people not knowing who's being taxed for what or who needs to be taxed, which will lead to more audits that will probably either be less efficient or people will just be inconvenienced. And this is going to lead to all the impacts of no equality. It's unenforceable because if you don't know how the system works, how are you ever supposed to charge people for it? It's going to decrease efficiency because if the IRS is confused about what they have to do, then they'll waste more time trying to figure that out. And then we'll decrease public services by the loss of revenue that gets lost in the shuffle. So now knows how it doesn't solve for anything. Right now, the biggest problem with our tax thing is the loopholes that corporations can just leave overseas. This is not going to solve that problem. It's not going to solve any of the. It's not going to keep companies from coming here. All it's going to do is tax U.S. citizens more. And you know how the companies are going to get out of it? They're just going to become citizens of different countries. They'll avoid all the income taxes. So we'll lose out on all the income taxes from. Yes.
I might have misunderstood you. Did you say that corporations were now going to become citizens of other countries?
No, the people who own the corporations will either just become citizens of other countries because the process is easier for them because they have tons of money and they can expedite anything. So if I own Burger King and my corporation have now moved to Scotland or wherever it moved to, you can just go and you can become a citizen of Scotland instead of paying the income tax for the U.S. And that is because the U.S. actually, if you're overseas, and you're still a U.S. citizen, they will charge you income tax. Yes.
One follow-up question. Burger King being a corporation is owned by individual stockholders, not an individual person, correct?
But like the richest CEO, so the majority shareholder is what I would say to that. Okay, so now into the environment DA. Right now, with their plan, this is going to increase the chemical sector. That sounds to me like it's just going to be burdening the U.S. more. If there's chemicals, that means there's a chance of chemicals being spilled. That means there's going to be waste. There's going to be more runoffs, more pollutants. The chemical sector is one of the most dangerous for the environment and we're just going to increase. We're going to try and increase that at the expense of farmers who need soil that's not been poisoned to grow crops. We need rivers to catch fish in, or lakes to catch fish in.
Just if you can. That's what you want to do
Yeah.
next.
Okay, so we're going to poison. We're going to pollute the rivers. We're going to pollute everything. Farming a decrease. It will lead to decreased farming, and then just the chemical cleanups are going to have to be paid for by the taxpayer, which is going to include more confusion. So just one more note on the fairness. This is actually not fairness. This is just giving to the rich. It's a form of classism, because now, since the lowest tax brackets will be increased, so they'll have to pay more. People who can't afford it will have to pay more, and people who can afford to pay more will be able to pay less and worm their way out of it. So essentially, all they're doing is waging war on poor people. And yes, thank you. Vote for opposition. Jesus. Tripping all over myself.
Waging a war
That'd be
on
good.
poor people.
I thought you were good.
You know those debates where you just feel fucking shook? That's,
You're all shook.
yeah.
Shook one.
Sorry, Jared, for all the swearing.
Jared's like, you guys are not respected.
All right, I'm going to get right into the voters, and I think that I can really, by the end of my voters, you'll see the distinct difference between what the opposition is presenting and what the government team has presented today. Voter number one. This is you can call it confusion. More specifically, the impact turn on the confusion. So if you go to their simplicity advantage, where they claim that this is going to make it simpler, we've stated that all they're doing is adding something else that is a large-scale change onto what has already been changed just for this upcoming fiscal year. So because of this, we're going to see an increase in the confusion of the tax code, and this is going to make it less simple. The second voter is our no solvency position, because when we've proven that the tax code isn't getting simpler, and we've proven that all this will do is make the poor have to pay more and the rich have to pay less. That this won't contribute to fairness, but it will rather do the opposite and increase classism in society. So when they say, and they're trying to solve for fairness and simplicity, and that's in their thesis statement. And at the point where they can't do that, then they have no solvency. The third voter is of system shock. So our system shock advantage, and you can cross-apply what we said about the impact turn on their simplicity advantage, where because this is such a large-scale change implemented on top of so many other changes, that it's going to shock the system, and you'll see a decrease in efficiency, and a decrease in efficiency. You'll see public services be cut because the revenue that the government thought they were getting with their current tax codes are now going to have to be augmented by this whole new large-scale reform. And so public services are going to be cut as a result. So our next voter number 4, is the environment. So first of all, our disadvantage too of how them increasing growth of chemical companies is going to be bad for the environment has been unresponded to. So that means that you can flow across our impacts of like more chemicals getting out into the environment. Almost any chemical production facility emits CO2, which is a major contributing greenhouse gas. So we're going to see more CO2 in the environment, which is going to contribute more to climate change and more to increasing temperatures around the world, as well as more chemicals in runoff and farming decreases and things like that. So now I'm going to give you, the judge, two worlds. Their world is where they put something down on paper that corporations are then able to take advantage of because they have the money to hire the tax attorneys to find the loopholes. So it's where corporations take advantage. People in poverty have to pay more. Public services are cut because the tax code becomes so complex, and our environment worsens. So essentially, their plan results in a massive classist conflict, wherein life gets worse for the poor and better for the rich. In our world, we keep the same tax code we have, allow our tax code to play out because they haven't noted the inherency of why the tax code will not become less complicated, and it will solve itself. Already we've seen changes that are helping lower income people be on equal footing with the rich, such as the earned income tax credits and things that I noted in my first speech. And therefore, our world is more just and helps lower income people become on equal footing with those who make more money. Vote opposition.
I love the two worlds, and we always do it now because Tom mastered it. After the semester.
Yeah.
He just did it the most, and I started copying him, and then now you've done it.
Yeah, I remember.
Well, and I've had
We'll get
judges
all into
tell
it.
me.
People are like, in their world.
Yeah.
In our world.
Will like move all
Yeah,
the way.
all the way. And he put his hands like over both of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Like in their world.
Once again, thank you everyone for being here, and thank you to my opponents for laying out a lot of things. I'm going to start with the fact that we are the government. We have the right to set this debate. We reformed the tax code in a way that personal income tax would be flat taxed at 17%. Now, the opposition has spent a lot of time talking to you about corporations. Our job was not to change the entire tax code. We just needed to reform it, in which we did. Anything they've tried to put forward about no solvency when they get into corporation loopholes, that was not part of our plan. We didn't need to solve for that. We don't need to respond to that. That was just, in essence, a time suck by the opposition talking about something that's irrelevant to the 17% income tax that we have. So my voter number one, I'm going to just start off where we started, is simplicity. They say we have no solvency for simplicity, but they didn't touch on the fact that currently the tax code is 73,954 pages. Our plan, 17% equals 17%. There's no longer multiple tax brackets. There's no longer multiple ways to file within those tax brackets. We offered you and showed you that those in itself, 28 different ways to file. Because that's all eliminated, because there's now 17 equals 17, we have made the tax code simpler, just by taking all that out and only putting one thing in. So that's your voter number one. Voter number two, again, I will go back to fairness. And it's the same thing. 17% equals 17%. Now, I asked the opposition, how much of these 39% is really affected? Well, that's a small part of America. That's the corporations and the CEOs and this and that. So yes, some people pay less. But I've also shown you, I'll get into my voter number three, of economic growth, which again has gone untouched upon. Our plan increases the economic growth in the U.S. by 1.8%. It also increases the housing sector by 1.5%. Those went untouched completely by the opposition. Just because of that, you have to flow that across. That also eliminates, which is my voter number four, their no solvency. They say I have no solvency, yet they haven't touched upon the fact that I've actually increased growth. I've actually increased the housing sector. And on top of that, what untouched is the fact that $400 billion in taxes go uncollected every year. This was completely untouched upon, so you have to assume that we're right. If they have no responses to it, Judge, you have to put on your voting sheet for us. Now, my voter number five is the system shock. And they say what we did creates a greater system shock because it complicates things. And again, I ask you, Judge, 7 times 4 equals 28, 28 different ways, 17% equals 17%. The U.S. is used to change. So therefore, we've put one thing in and eliminated 28 things. That does not increase system shock. That actually makes things smaller. So again, you can eliminate that as a voter. Now, my opponents want to talk about two worlds, and they want to talk about equality and fairness. When everyone pays the same amount, when everyone is asked to pay the same amount of taxes, and they know that's what they're going to pay, that is what we call fairness. That is what we call equality. Now, just because someone is wealthy and makes more money does not mean they should be responsible for more. They're in themselves is saying, well, we want everything to be equal and fair, but you know what? You make more money, you pay more money. Nowhere in any world, in any dictionary, is that equal, is that fair. So again, let's look at the important things. Our plan increases revenue to the government. Our plan increases the housing sector. Our plan increases outside sectors by making, because of manufactured goods and chemicals. We did not say let's go pollute lakes and stuff like that, but I'm going to let that go because, it was not touched upon. But we did offer the responses that it increases consumer goods, this increases consumer supplies, because these industries funnel into other industries. Now, I have plenty of impacts there because, again, I've increased total economic growth, completely untouched upon. I don't know how many times I need to harp on this, but I have complete solvency in that I have simplified the tax code. I have complete solvency in that I have reformed it. Whether I have made 17% equals 17%, I have 100% solvency there. And again, I have 1.8% economic growth, 400 billion in untaxed revenue that will get touched upon, and housing sector increased by 1.5%. In the end, my plan generates more money for America, has more Americans paying less taxes, and makes everybody equal and fair, which we believe is a fundamental right in the U.S. So once again, I demand you vote a government ballot. Thank you.
Do it.
Tom, where did you get the numbers that it's going to increase housing